The clock on the police station wall showed 6:30 p.m. when Officer Marcus Thompson grabbed his keys and headed out for his evening patrol. It was a cold Tuesday in March, and the streets of Chicago were busy with people rushing home from work. Thompson had been a cop for 12 years, and he thought he knew everything about reading people and situations. But what he didn't know was that this night would change many lives forever. Thompson was not like the other officers at his station. While most cops tried to help everyone equally, Thompson had different ideas about different types of people. He believed that some people deserved respect and others did not. His fellow officers had noticed his attitude, but nobody had done anything serious about it. They would later regret this mistake. As Thompson drove his patrol car through the quiet streets of Riverside neighborhood, he was looking for trouble. This area was known for its big houses and expensive cars. Most people who lived here were wealthy and white. When Thompson saw people who looked different from the usual residents, he became suspicious. Tonight, that suspicion would have deadly results. At exactly 7:15 p.m., Thompson noticed a blue Honda Civic driving carefully down Maple Street. The car was clean and well-maintained, but that wasn't what caught his attention. What made him look twice was the elderly black woman behind the wheel. In Thompson's mind, she didn't belong in this neighborhood. He decided to follow her. The woman driving the Honda was Sarah Williams, age 67. She had just finished her weekly volunteer work at the Riverside Community Center, where she taught young mothers how to read better. Sarah had been doing this volunteer work for 15 years, ever since she retired from her job as a school principal. Everyone at the community center loved her gentle smile and patient teaching style. Sarah was thinking about the young woman she had helped that evening. Maria, a 19-year-old mother of two, had finally read an entire page without asking for help. Sarah felt proud and happy as she drove toward her small apartment across town. She had no idea that a police car was following her, or that the officer inside had already decided she was somehow doing something wrong. Thompson followed Sarah for 3 blocks looking for any reason to stop her. He checked her speed. She was driving exactly at the speed limit. He looked at her car. It had current license plates and working taillights. But Thompson didn't need a real reason. In his 12 years as a cop, he had learned how to find excuses when he wanted to stop someone. Sarah noticed the police car behind her when she stopped at a red light. She felt nervous the way many Black Americans feel when they see police. Her son James had always told her to be extra careful around cops, to keep her hands visible, and to speak politely. Sarah had raised James to be respectful of authority, and he had grown up to become a federal prosecutor. She was proud that her son now worked to make sure justice was done fairly for everyone. When the light turned green, Sarah continued driving carefully. She was only 2 miles from home, but Thompson had made his decision. At 7:25 p.m., he turned on his flashing lights and pulled her over. Sarah's heart began beating fast as she pulled her car to the side of the road. She had not been speeding or breaking any traffic laws. She wondered what the officer wanted. She turned off her car engine and rolled down her window, placing both hands on the steering wheel where the officer could see them, just like her son had taught her. Thompson got out of his patrol car and walked toward Sarah's Honda. He was wearing a body camera that recorded everything, but he had forgotten about it. His partner, Officer Rodriguez, was in another part of the town and would not arrive for several minutes. Thompson was alone with Sarah, and his prejudices were already controlling his thoughts. "License and registration," Thompson said in a harsh voice, even before Sarah could say hello. "Good evening, officer," Sarah replied politely. "May I ask why you stopped me? I don't think I was speeding." Thompson didn't like her question. In his mind, people like Sarah should not question police officers. "Just give me your license and registration," he repeated more aggressively this time. Sarah reached slowly toward her purse on the passenger seat to get her driver's license. "I'm just getting my license," she said clearly, wanting to make sure the officer understood her movements. "Keep your hands where I can see them," Thompson shouted suddenly, even though Sarah's hands were clearly visible. Sarah was confused and frightened. She had done nothing wrong, but the officer seemed angry and suspicious. "I'm sorry, officer. I'm just trying to get my license like you asked." "Get out of the car," Thompson ordered. Sarah didn't understand why she needed to get out of the car, but she didn't want to make the situation worse. She slowly opened her car door and stepped out. At 67 years old, she moved carefully, especially on the cold evening. She was wearing her favorite cardigan sweater with her volunteer badge still pinned to it. Thompson looked at Sarah and saw only what his prejudices told him to see. He didn't see a retired school principal who had dedicated her life to education. He didn't see a volunteer who spent her free time helping young mothers learn to read. He didn't see a woman who had raised a son to become a federal prosecutor. All Thompson saw was someone he believed didn't belong in this neighborhood. "What are you doing in this area?" Thompson demanded. "I was volunteering at the community center," Sarah answered honestly. "I help teach reading classes on Tuesday evenings." Thompson didn't believe her. "Show me some ID that proves you work there." Sarah realized she had left her volunteer coordinator's contact information in her car. "The information is in my glove compartment. May I get it?" This was the moment when everything went wrong. Thompson's hand moved toward his gun as Sarah turned toward her car. His years of prejudice and suspicious thinking had convinced him that this elderly woman was somehow dangerous. "Don't move," he shouted. Sarah froze, her hand halfway toward the car door. She was completely confused now. "Officer, I'm just trying to get the information you asked for." "Step away from the vehicle." Sarah took a step back, her hands raised slightly to show she wasn't holding anything. The volunteer badge on her sweater caught the streetlight, but Thompson didn't notice it. His adrenaline was pumping, and his prejudices had taken complete control of his thinking. At that moment, Officer Rodriguez arrived as backup. He had worked with Thompson before and knew about his attitude problems, but he had never seen Thompson this aggressive with an elderly woman who was clearly not a threat. Rodriguez got out of his car and immediately saw that the situation was wrong. Sarah Williams looked like someone's grandmother, standing beside her car with her hands slightly raised, wearing a cardigan sweater and looking terrified. "Thompson, what's the situation here?" Rodriguez asked. But Thompson was beyond listening to reason. In his mind, he had already decided that Sarah was guilty of something even though she had broken no laws. The prejudices that had been growing in his heart for years were about to explode into violence. Sarah looked at the two officers and made one last attempt to calm the situation. "Officers, I think there's been a misunderstanding. I'm happy to show you my identification and explain why I'm here." Those would be among the last words Sarah Williams ever spoke. The streetlight above cast long shadows on the quiet road where Sarah Williams stood next to her Honda Civic. Her hands were slightly raised, and she was trying to understand why this simple traffic stop had become so frightening. Officer Rodriguez watched from his patrol car, feeling that something was very wrong with this situation. Thompson's hand rested on his gun as he stared at Sarah. His breathing was heavy, and his mind was filled with the racist thoughts that had been growing inside him for years. He saw an elderly black woman in an expensive neighborhood, and his prejudices told him she must be up to no good. "I said step away from the vehicle," Thompson shouted again. Sarah took another small step backward. Her legs were shaking, not from the cold March air, but from fear. She had never been in trouble with the law in her entire 67 years of life. She had raised her son to respect police officers, and she had always believed that if you followed the rules, everything would be okay. "Officer, please," Sarah said in a quiet voice. "I'm just trying to cooperate with you. I don't understand what I've done wrong." Rodriguez got out of his patrol car and walked closer. He could see that Sarah was scared and confused. She looked like any grandmother you might see at church or at the grocery store. Her volunteer badge was clearly visible on her cardigan, and her car registration was current. There was absolutely nothing suspicious about her. "Thompson," Rodriguez said carefully, "maybe we should just check her ID and let her go home. She doesn't seem to be causing any trouble." But Thompson was not listening to his partner. The anger and hate that had been building inside him for years was now controlling his actions. He had pulled over dozens of black drivers before, always, looking for reasons to make their lives difficult. But tonight something was different. Tonight his hatred was about to turn deadly. Sarah tried once more to calm the situation. "Officers, my name is Sarah Williams. I live on Oak Street, and I was just volunteering at the community center. I teach reading classes there every Tuesday. Would you like me to call my supervisor to confirm this? Shut up, Thompson yelled. I don't believe anything you're saying. Rodriguez was shocked by his partner's language. Even though he knew Thompson had problems with black people, he had never seen him this out of control. Rodriguez started to move closer, hoping to calm Thompson down before something bad happened. Sarah reached slowly into her cardigan pocket to get her cell phone, thinking she could call someone to verify her story. But Thompson saw her hand movement and completely lost control. She's going for a weapon, Thompson screamed, even though Rodriguez could clearly see that Sarah was just reaching for her phone. No, she's not, Rodriguez shouted back. Thompson, calm down. But it was too late. Thompson pulled out his gun and pointed it directly at Sarah's chest. The elderly woman froze in complete terror, her phone still halfway out of her pocket. Please don't hurt me, Sarah whispered. I'm not armed. I'm just a volunteer teacher. Time seemed to move very slowly. Rodriguez was running toward Thompson, shouting for him to put his gun down. Sarah was standing perfectly still, her eyes wide with fear. And Thompson, filled with years of hate and prejudice, made the decision that would destroy multiple lives forever. The first gunshot rang out at exactly 7:43 p.m. Sarah's body jerked backward as the bullet hit her chest. She looked down in shock and confusion, seeing blood spreading across her favorite cardigan. The volunteer badge that she wore so proudly was now covered in red. Thompson? No! Rodriguez screamed, but Thompson fired again. The second bullet hit Sarah in the chest, and she collapsed to the cold pavement beside her car. Her purse fell with her, spilling its contents across the street. Thank you cards from the children she had taught to read scattered in the wind. Her car keys landed next to a photo of her son James in his graduation cap and gown. Rodriguez reached Thompson and grabbed his arm. What have you done? He shouted. She was unarmed. Thompson stood over Sarah's body, his gun still in his hand. For a moment he seemed confused, as if he couldn't believe what he had just done. Then his police training kicked in, and he started trying to create a story that would justify his actions. She was reaching for something, Thompson said, his voice shaking. I thought she had a gun. Rodriguez knelt down beside Sarah and checked for a pulse. She was still breathing, but barely. Blood was flowing from 2 holes in her chest, and her eyes were losing focus. Call for an ambulance, Rodriguez yelled, as he tried to stop the bleeding with his hands. Thompson stood there for several seconds before finally calling for emergency medical help. His voice was calm now, as if he was reporting a normal incident. But Rodriguez could see Sarah's life slipping away with each breath. Stay with me, ma'am, Rodriguez whispered to Sarah. Help is coming. Sarah tried to speak, but only blood came from her mouth. She was thinking about her son, James, wondering if she would ever see him again. She was thinking about Maria, the young mother she had helped learn to read just an hour earlier. She was thinking about all the children who were waiting for next Tuesday's reading lesson. The ambulance arrived 8 minutes later, but it felt like hours to Rodriguez. The paramedics worked frantically to save Sarah's life, but the damage was too severe. She had been shot twice in the chest from close range, and she had lost too much blood. At 8:07 p.m., exactly 24 minutes after Thompson had first pulled her over for no reason, Sarah Williams was pronounced dead at the scene. Rodriguez watched the paramedics cover Sarah's body with a white sheet. Her volunteer badge was still pinned to her blood-stained cardigan. The thank you cards from her students were still scattered around her car, many of them now stained with her blood. Thompson was trying to convince the other officers who had arrived that he had acted in self-defense. He claimed that Sarah had been reaching for a weapon, that he had feared for his life. But Rodriguez had seen everything, and he knew the truth. She was getting her phone, Rodriguez told the sergeant who was investigating the scene. She was trying to call someone to verify her story. She never threatened us. Meanwhile, across town at the federal courthouse, James Williams was working late in his office. He was preparing for a major case that would start the next week, a corruption trial involving dirty police officers who had been taking bribes and abusing their power. James had built his career fighting against exactly the kind of police misconduct that had just killed his mother. James's phone rang at 8:15 p.m. The caller ID showed that it was the Chicago Police Department. James assumed they were calling about his upcoming trial, perhaps needing some information about evidence or witnesses. "This is Federal Prosecutor James Williams," he answered professionally. "Mr. Williams," the voice on the other end said carefully, "this is Sergeant Martinez with the Chicago Police Department. I'm afraid I have some very bad news about your mother." James felt his heart stop. "What about my mother? Is she okay?" "Sir, I'm very sorry to tell you that your mother was involved in a shooting incident this evening. She was pronounced dead at the scene." The phone slipped from James's hand and clattered to the floor. The prosecutor, who had spent his career seeking justice for victims of violence, had just become a victim's family member himself. 20 miles away, Sarah's body was being loaded into the coroner's van. The woman who had dedicated her life to helping others learn and grow would never teach another reading lesson. The mother who had raised a son to fight for justice had become the victim of the very injustice her son fought against every day. Officer Thompson was already meeting with his lawyer and the police union representative, trying to build a defense for his actions. But Officer Rodriguez was writing his report, and he was determined to tell the truth about what really happened on that quiet street in the Riverside neighborhood. The shot that killed Sarah Williams would echo through the justice system for years to come. But first it would shatter the heart of the son who loved her more than anything in the world. The news of Sarah Williams' death spread quickly through Chicago. By midnight, reporters were gathered outside the police station asking hard questions. Social media was filled with angry posts about another unarmed black person killed by police. But this case was different. Sarah was not just any victim. She was the mother of Federal Prosecutor James Williams, one of the most respected legal minds in the state. James sat in his dark apartment, still wearing the same clothes he had on when he received the terrible phone call. He couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think about anything except his mother's gentle smile and the violent way her life had ended. His colleagues from the prosecutor's office had come to support him, but James felt completely alone. Detective Lisa Chen was assigned to lead the investigation into Sarah's death. Chen was known for being thorough and fair, someone who didn't let politics or department loyalty get in the way of finding the truth. When she arrived at the crime scene and saw Sarah's body, she knew this case would be different from anything she had handled before. The first thing Chen did was secure all the evidence. Thompson's body camera had recorded everything, and the footage was shocking. It clearly showed Sarah trying to cooperate, reaching slowly for her phone, and posing no threat at all. The video proved that Thompson had lied about Sarah reaching for a weapon. Officer Rodriguez gave his statement to Detective Chen the next morning. He was nervous because he knew his testimony would end Thompson's career and possibly send him to prison. But Rodriguez also knew that staying silent would make him part of the cover-up. "She never threatened us," Rodriguez told Chen. "She was scared and confused, but she was trying to follow orders." Thompson just snapped. "I've worked with him for 3 years, and I knew he had problems with black people, but I never thought he would do something like this." Chen asked Rodriguez to explain what he meant about Thompson having problems with black people. Rodriguez took a deep breath. "Thompson always made racist comments during our patrols. He would say things like, 'These people don't belong in nice neighborhoods, or they're all up to something.' He pulled over black drivers way more than white drivers, always looking for excuses to search their cars or give them tickets." This information made Chen realize that Sarah's death wasn't just a single incident. It might be part of a pattern of racist behavior that the police department had ignored for years. Chen began investigating Thompson's history as a police officer. What she found was disturbing. In his 12 years on the force, Thompson had received 17 complaints about excessive force or discriminatory treatment. Almost all of these complaints came from black citizens, but the police department had dismissed most of the complaints without serious investigation. Mary Jackson, a 34-year-old nurse, had filed a complaint against Thompson 2 years earlier. Thompson had pulled her over for suspicious driving when she was coming home from her night shift at the hospital. He had forced her to get out of her car in the rain, searched her vehicle without permission, and called her racist names. The complaint was filed away and forgotten. Robert Davis, a 45-year-old teacher, had been stopped by Thompson outside his own house. Thompson claimed Davis looked like someone who had committed a burglary in the area. Davis was handcuffed on his own front lawn while his children watched from the window. His complaint was also dismissed. Chen found 12 more similar stories. Thompson had been terrorizing black citizens for years, and the police department had done nothing to stop him. But Chen's investigation revealed something even worse. When she examined Thompson's social media accounts, she found posts that made her stomach turn. Thompson had shared racist memes, made jokes about violence against black people, and expressed support for white supremacist groups. One post from Thompson's Facebook account showed a picture of a lynching with the caption, "The good old days." Another post said, "Some people need to learn their place." Thompson had also joined several online groups that promoted racial hatred and violence. Chen discovered that Thompson had been communicating with other police officers who shared his racist views. Text messages between Thompson and Officer Bradley showed them sharing racist jokes and talking about ways to make life difficult for black citizens in their patrol areas. In one text message, Thompson had written, "Pulled over another one today. Made him sweat for an hour before I let him go. These people need to know who's in charge." Bradley had replied, "Good job. Keep up the pressure. Maybe they'll move out of our neighborhoods." Detective Chen realized that Thompson wasn't working alone. There was a group of racist officers in the department who were systematically harassing black citizens. Sarah Williams had become the victim of their hatred. James Williams tried to stay away from the investigation because he knew his involvement could hurt the case. But his colleagues in the federal prosecutor's office took over with determination. They had worked with James for years and respected him greatly. Now they wanted justice for his mother. Federal prosecutor Angela Martinez was assigned to lead the case. She had prosecuted hate crimes before and knew how to build a strong case against racist criminals. When she saw the evidence against Thompson, she knew this would be one of the most important cases of her career. The medical examiner's report provided crucial evidence. Dr. Susan Park, who performed the autopsy on Sarah's body, found that both bullets had entered Sarah's chest from the front. The angle of the bullets proved that Sarah's hands were raised when she was shot, not reaching for anything threatening. The victim was shot from approximately 6 feet away, Dr. Park told Detective Chen. Both bullets hit vital organs. She would have died within minutes. There is no physical evidence that she was reaching toward the officer or making any threatening movements. The forensic evidence was devastating for Thompson's defense. The gunshot residue patterns, the bullet trajectories, and Sarah's wounds all proved that she was standing still with her hands visible when Thompson shot her. Meanwhile, Thompson had hired the best criminal defense lawyer money could buy. Attorney Richard Stone was known for getting police officers out of trouble, even when they had clearly broken the law. Stone immediately began building Thompson's defense around the claim that he had feared for his life. But Stone knew this case would be different. The body camera footage was clear, the witness testimony was strong, and the evidence of Thompson's racist history would be hard to explain away. The community around Sarah's neighborhood was demanding justice. Pastor Michael Brown, who had known Sarah for 20 years, organized peaceful protests outside the police station. Hundreds of people carried signs with Sarah's picture and chanted, "Justice for Sarah." Sarah Williams was an angel, Pastor Brown told the crowd. She spent her life helping others learn to read, helping young mothers improve their lives, and raising a son who fights for justice every day. She died because one man's heart was filled with hate instead of love. The children from Sarah's reading classes came to the protests with their mothers. Many of them were crying, holding the thank you cards they had made for Sarah but would never be able to give her. Maria Santos, the young mother Sarah had helped just hours before her death, spoke through tears. "Mrs. Williams believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. She taught me that education could change my children's lives. She was killed for no reason except the color of her skin." As the investigation continued, more evidence of Thompson's racism came to light. His training records showed that he had failed sensitivity training courses multiple times. His supervisors had noted his attitude problems but had never taken serious action. Internal affairs. Captain Robert Hayes was forced to admit that the department had failed to properly investigate the complaints against Thompson. "We should have taken action years ago," Hayes told reporters. "If we had done our job, Sarah Williams might still be alive today." The police chief, David Wilson, announced that Thompson would be fired immediately and that all officers with histories of discrimination complaints would be reviewed. But for Sarah Williams, these changes came too late. Detective Chen completed her investigation after 2 weeks of intensive work. Her report was 200 pages long and included hundreds of pieces of evidence proving that Thompson had murdered Sarah Williams in cold blood because of racial hatred. The case was now ready for trial, and federal prosecutor Martinez was confident that justice would be served. But she also knew that no conviction could bring back the gentle woman who had died simply because she was black and in the wrong place when a racist police officer decided to let his hatred take control. James Williams prepared for the hardest weeks of his life, knowing he would have to sit in a courtroom and watch his mother's killer try to escape punishment for his crime. 6 months after Sarah Williams's death, the courthouse in downtown Chicago was surrounded by news trucks and protesters. The trial of Officer Marcus Thompson had become one of the most watched cases in the country. People from all over America were following the story of the racist cop who had killed a federal prosecutor's mother. Judge Patricia Wong had been chosen to oversee the trial. She was known for being fair but tough, someone who wouldn't let lawyers play games in her courtroom. Judge Wong knew this case would be difficult, with emotions running high on all sides. She was determined to make sure justice was done properly. The jury selection took 3 days. Lawyers questioned hundreds of potential jurors, looking for people who could be fair despite all the media coverage. Finally, 12 jurors were chosen, 6 men and 6 women of different races and backgrounds. They would decide if Thompson was guilty of murder. Thompson sat at the defendant's table wearing a dark suit instead of his police uniform. He looked older than he had 6 months ago, with gray hair and tired eyes. His wife and 2 young children sat in the gallery behind him, crying softly. They knew their husband and father had destroyed their family forever. James Williams sat in the front row every day, directly across from Thompson. He had taken leave from his job to attend the trial. James wanted to look into the eyes of the man who had killed his mother. Sometimes Thompson would glance at James, but he could never hold eye contact for long. Federal prosecutor Angela Martinez stood up to give her opening statement. She walked slowly in front of the jury, looking each member in the eye before she spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen," Martinez began, "this case is about hate. It's about a police officer who let his racist beliefs turn him into a killer. Sarah Williams died because Officer Thompson decided that a black woman didn't deserve to live." Martinez told the jury about Sarah's life, how she had been a school principal for 30 years, how she volunteered to teach reading every Tuesday, how she had raised a son who became a federal prosecutor. She explained that Sarah had never been arrested, never committed a crime, never hurt anyone in her entire 67 years of life. "The defendant will try to tell you that he feared for his life," Martinez continued, "but the evidence will show you that the only thing Marcus Thompson feared was a world where black people are treated as equals." Thompson's defense lawyer, Richard Stone, gave a very different opening statement. Stone was expensive and experienced, known for getting police officers out of trouble. He tried to make the jury feel sorry for Thompson. "My client is not a murderer," Stone told the jury. "He is a police officer who made a split-second decision in a dangerous situation. Officer Thompson has served his community for 12 years, risking his life to keep people safe. On that night, he believed he was in danger and he acted to protect himself." Stone claimed that the darkness, Sarah's movements, and the stress of police work had caused Thompson to make an honest mistake. He asked the jury to remember that police officers have to make life-or-death decisions in seconds. But Stone knew his case was weak. The body camera footage was clear, and Thompson's racist social media posts would be hard to explain away. The prosecution's first witness was Officer Rodriguez, Thompson's partner who had seen everything. Rodriguez was nervous as he took the witness stand, but he was determined to tell the truth. "Thompson had been making racist comments all evening," Rodriguez testified. When we pulled over Mrs. Williams, I could see she was just a scared elderly woman. She was trying to cooperate, but Thompson was treating her like a dangerous criminal. Rodriguez described how Sarah had been reaching for her phone to call someone who could verify her volunteer work. She was moving very slowly, explaining exactly what she was doing. There was no way anyone could think she was reaching for a weapon. Martinez played the body camera footage for the jury. The courtroom was completely silent as they watched Sarah's final minutes. The video clearly showed her hands raised, her confused and frightened face, and Thompson shooting her without any justification. Several jury members were crying when the video ended. Even Thompson's own children had to leave the courtroom because they couldn't watch their father kill an innocent woman. The prosecution then called witnesses who testified about Thompson's history of racism. Mary Jackson, the nurse who had filed a complaint against Thompson, told the jury how he had called her racist names and searched her car illegally. "He told me that people like me didn't belong in nice neighborhoods," Jackson testified. "He said I was probably selling drugs or stealing something. I was wearing my hospital uniform and coming home from saving people's lives, but he treated me like a criminal." Robert Davis, the teacher who had been handcuffed in front of his own house, described how Thompson had humiliated him in front of his children. "My 8-year-old son asked me why the police officer was so mean to Daddy," Davis said, his voice breaking. "I didn't know how to explain that some people hate others just because of the color of their skin." The prosecution showed the jury Thompson's racist social media posts. The posts were so hateful that Judge Wong had to warn people in the courtroom to remain quiet. Thompson's posts included pictures of lynchings, jokes about violence against black people, and support for white supremacist groups. Detective Chen testified about Thompson's text messages with other officers, sharing racist jokes and talking about harassing black citizens. The jury could see that Thompson's racism wasn't just personal beliefs. It was something he acted on as a police officer. Dr. Susan Park, the medical examiner, explained the autopsy results. Her testimony proved that Sarah had been shot while standing still with her hands raised. The angle of the bullets and the distance of the shots proved that Thompson had executed Sarah in cold blood. The victim posed no threat to the officer, Dr. Park testified. She was standing approximately 6 feet away with her hands visible when she was shot twice in the chest. The prosecution's final witness was Maria Santos, the young mother Sarah had been helping to learn to read. Maria broke down crying as she described her last conversation with Sarah just an hour before she died. "Mrs. Williams told me she was proud of how much I had improved," Maria testified. "She said education would give my children better lives. She died on her way home from helping people like me. She was murdered for trying to make the world better." When it was time for the defense, Stone called Thompson to testify in his own defense. This was a risky move, but Stone knew the case was almost hopeless without Thompson's testimony. Thompson took the witness stand wearing his suit, looking nothing like the aggressive officer from the body camera video. He spoke quietly, claiming he had feared for his life when Sarah reached toward her car. "I thought she was reaching for a weapon," Thompson testified. "In the darkness, with her hand moving toward the vehicle, I believed my life was in danger." But Martinez destroyed Thompson's testimony during cross-examination. She showed him his own body camera footage, pointing out that Sarah's movements were slow and clearly visible. "Mr. Thompson, can you see Mrs. Williams's hands in this video?" Martinez asked. "Yes," Thompson admitted. "Are her hands empty?" "Yes." "Is she moving slowly and explaining her actions?" "Yes." Martinez then showed Thompson his racist social media posts one by one. "Did you post this picture of a lynching with the caption, 'The good old days'?" Thompson's face turned red. "I don't remember posting that. Did you write this text message saying these people need to know their place?" "I may have been joking." "Do you think murder is a joke, Mr. Thompson?" Thompson couldn't answer. The jury could see that his racism had motivated the killing. Stone tried to save his client by calling character witnesses, other police officers who said Thompson was a good cop and a family man. But their testimony couldn't overcome the mountain of evidence showing Thompson's guilt. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Every day, the courtroom was packed with reporters, community members, and Sarah's family and friends. James Williams never missed a day, staring at Thompson and silently demanding justice for his mother. During closing arguments, Martinez reminded the jury of the evidence. Marcus Thompson didn't kill Sarah Williams because he feared for his life. He killed her because he believed that Black lives don't matter. He killed her because 12 years of racist hatred finally exploded into murder. Stone made one last attempt to save Thompson. My client made a mistake in a split second of fear. He doesn't deserve to die for one terrible moment of poor judgment. But the jury had seen enough. After 3 days of deliberation, they returned to the courtroom with their verdict. The foreman stood up as Judge Wong asked for the decision. We find the defendant, Marcus Thompson, guilty of first-degree murder. Thompson's wife screamed and collapsed. His children were crying. But across the courtroom, James Williams felt no joy. The verdict couldn't bring his mother back or undo the pain Thompson had caused. The same jury would now decide if Thompson deserved the death penalty. The trial that had gripped the nation was about to reach its final, most important decision. The guilty verdict against Marcus Thompson sent shockwaves through the courthouse. For the first time in Chicago's history, a police officer had been convicted of first-degree murder for killing a civilian. But the trial wasn't over yet. The same jury that had found Thompson guilty now had to decide if he should live or die. The penalty phase of the trial began the next week. This time, the question wasn't whether Thompson was guilty. That had already been decided. Now the jury had to choose between life in prison without parole or the death penalty. It was one of the hardest decisions any jury could face. Federal prosecutor Angela Martinez knew this would be the most important part of the trial. She had to convince 12 people that Thompson's crime was so terrible, so filled with hate, that only death would serve justice. Ladies and gentlemen, Martinez began her penalty phase argument. Marcus Thompson didn't just kill Sarah Williams. He killed her because of the color of her skin. This wasn't a moment of poor judgment. This was the result of years of racial hatred that finally exploded into murder. Martinez showed the jury photos of Sarah's volunteer work, her reading classes, and the thank you cards from children she had helped. She reminded them that Sarah had never hurt anyone, had spent her life helping others, and had raised a son who fought for justice every day. Sarah Williams died because one man decided that Black lives don't matter, Martinez continued. The defendant didn't just take one life. He destroyed an entire family and terrorized a whole community. Some crimes are so evil that life in prison isn't enough punishment. Thompson's defense lawyer, Richard Stone, faced an almost impossible task. How do you ask a jury to spare the life of a man who had committed such a hateful murder? Stone decided to focus on Thompson's family and his children who would grow up without their father. Yes, my client committed a terrible crime, Stone told the jury, but killing him won't bring Sarah Williams back. It will only create more victims, his wife and 2 young children who will have to live with the shame of having their father executed. Stone brought Thompson's 8-year-old daughter and 6-year-old son into the courtroom. The children were crying and didn't understand why their daddy was in trouble. Stone hoped the jury would feel mercy for these innocent children. These children didn't choose to have Marcus Thompson as their father, Stone argued. But if you sentence him to death, they will spend their whole lives knowing their father was executed. They will grow up as victims of this tragedy too. The most powerful moment of the penalty phase came when James Williams took the witness stand. The federal prosecutor who had built his career seeking justice was now asking for justice for his own mother. James walked slowly to the witness stand, wearing the same black suit he had worn to his mother's funeral. The courtroom was completely silent as he sat down and looked directly at Thompson. My mother was the strongest person I ever knew, James began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. She worked 2 jobs to put me through college. She volunteered her time to help people who couldn't read. She taught me that education could change the world. James described growing up as Sarah's son, how she had worked extra hours as a school principal to pay for his law school, how proud she was when he became a federal prosecutor. My mother used to say that hate was like poison. It hurt the person who carried it more than anyone else, James continued. Marcus Thompson carried so much hate in his heart that it turned him into a killer. The courtroom was completely quiet as James spoke about the night his mother died. I was working late, preparing to prosecute corrupt police officers when I got the call that a police officer had killed my mother. The irony wasn't lost on me. I spent my career fighting against exactly the kind of police misconduct that took my mother's life. James looked directly at Thompson as he continued his testimony. I don't feel satisfaction in asking for the death penalty. I don't feel joy in the thought of this man being executed. But I believe that some crimes are so terrible, so filled with hate, that society must respond with its strongest punishment. Martinez asked James about his mother's impact on the community. My mother taught hundreds of children to read during her career as a principal, James testified. She volunteered every Tuesday for 15 years helping young mothers improve their education. The night she died, she had just helped a 19-year-old learn to read an entire page without help. That young woman will never forget my mother's patience and kindness. James's voice broke slightly as he continued. My mother believed that every person had value, regardless of their race or background. She died because Marcus Thompson believed the opposite, that some people's lives don't matter. That kind of hate cannot be allowed to stand. When James finished his testimony, there wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom. Even some of Thompson's supporters were crying. The defense tried to counter with testimony from Thompson's family members. His wife took the stand and begged the jury to spare her husband's life. Marcus made a terrible mistake, she testified through tears. But he's still my children's father. If you kill him, you'll be destroying our whole family. Please show mercy. Thompson's mother also testified, describing her son as a good man who had lost his way. But their emotional appeals couldn't overcome the evidence of Thompson's years of racist hatred and the brutal murder of an innocent woman. The jury deliberated for 5 long days. During this time, protesters gathered outside the courthouse every day. Some carried signs supporting the death penalty, while others opposed it. The case had divided the community and the nation. James Williams spent those 5 days thinking about his mother and what she would have wanted. Sarah had always taught forgiveness and love, but she had also taught that actions have consequences. On Friday afternoon, the jury finally reached their decision. Judge Wong called everyone back to the courtroom. Thompson sat at the defendant's table, his hands shaking as he waited to learn his fate. The jury foreman stood up, holding the piece of paper that would determine if Thompson lived or died. We sentence Marcus Thompson to death, the foreman announced. Thompson's wife screamed and collapsed in the gallery. His children were crying, not understanding what was happening to their father. Thompson himself showed no emotion, sitting perfectly, still as if he couldn't believe what he had heard. Across the courtroom, James Williams closed his eyes and thought about his mother. Justice had been served, but it felt hollow. Nothing could bring Sarah back or undo the pain Thompson had caused. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded James as he left the building. How do you feel about the death sentence? One reporter asked. James paused before answering. I feel that justice has been done, but I don't feel celebration. My mother always taught me that hate was destructive, and Marcus Thompson's hate destroyed many lives, including his own. Do you think your mother would have wanted him to receive the death penalty? Another reporter asked. My mother would have wanted him to change his heart and find redemption, James replied. But she also would have wanted him to face the consequences of his actions. Some crimes are so terrible that society must respond with its strongest punishment to protect others. Thompson was immediately transferred to death row at the state penitentiary. His appeals would continue for years, as they always do in capital cases, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. Legal experts said it was unlikely his conviction would be overturned. The case became a landmark in police accountability. Sarah Williams' death had exposed a network of racist officers in the Chicago Police Department, leading to investigations and reforms that changed how police misconduct was handled. 6 months after the trial, James Williams returned to his job. As a federal prosecutor, he threw himself into his work, prosecuting corruption and fighting for justice with even more determination than before. He kept a photo of his mother on his desk, reminding him every day why his work mattered. The community center where Sarah had volunteered renamed their reading program the Sarah Williams Literacy Initiative. Maria Santos, the young mother Sarah had helped just hours before her death, became a volunteer teacher herself, determined to continue Sarah's work. "Mrs. Williams taught me that education could change my life," Maria said at the dedication ceremony. "Now I want to teach other people the same lesson. Her love will continue through all the lives she touched." Thompson remained on death row, his appeals slowly working their way through the courts. His family moved away from Chicago, unable to bear the shame and constant attention. His children would grow up knowing their father was a convicted murderer, waiting to be executed. Years later, James Williams would say that the death sentence brought justice but not peace. "My mother's greatest victory wasn't the punishment of her killer," he reflected. "It was the changes her death brought about, the police reforms, the community programs, and the reminder that every life has value." Sarah Williams had spent her life teaching others to read and learn. In death, she taught an entire nation to read the signs of injustice and demand better from those sworn to protect and serve. Her legacy lived on in every person who chose love over hate, justice over vengeance, and hope over despair.